Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this YT Live with Rida Shafeek. Rida, welcome to this YT Live, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you
Before
for having me.
I give Rida the mic, I want to just give a brief introduction to this. So, Rida's story is a very interesting story, an unusual story. If you've been watching a lot of our stories right now, where Rida's story is primarily that of a quant improvement. Rida improved from a, let me just look at my data, Q32 to a Q33 through a Q49 on quant, and and she also has what I call as a very non-quant background is what I should call it. Rida, you're an MA in
Yeah,
psychology or so,
yeah.
and so we're going to talk about how she went about taking the test and preparing and tracking her improvement. So Rida, welcome to the session, and first of all, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Rajat, and hi to everyone who's here. So we're here to discuss my extreme improvement.
Okay. Well, that's good. So Rida scored a 730 from a 540 on your first mark. So 190-point improvement or almost a 200-point improvement. And we were talking about your last mark. It says you scored a 760 on your last official mark prior to taking the test, and you're still gutted about the fact that hey, you couldn't replicate that those 30 points. Yes. So we'll talk about this, but let's kind of start from your background. Tell us about who you are, what do you do, when did you graduate, and why the GMAT first.
Okay, so my name is Rida Shafeek. I graduated in 2021 with a BA in psychology, sociology, and English.
Hmm.
So because I graduated in 2021 and because of the current situation where we're all staying at home, I decided that now was the perfect time for me to give a little bit of a focused prep towards my GMAT before I enter into a workplace. So I thought that now is a time where I could take about a 3 month gap, prepare, give the exam, and then not have to worry about it till admissions roll around.
So when you think about the GMAT, it was all about strategic options. Why? Because you're saying, hey, the test score is valid for 5 years, and so let's get done with it. And at any point you want to go for an MBA, you can always go about doing an MBA. That's perfect. So and for those of you recent grads, I think this is one of the best ways to do this, where you get done with the test overall. Um, so let's talk about this and really say so you are a psychology grad, and so verbal more or less, a lot more natural for you. I wouldn't say more or less natural, but a lot more natural than quant. So when did you start preparing for the GMAT, and how did you go about doing that?
So I graduated in May of 2021, and in June I started my preparation. So from June till August, I was preparing by myself. I was reading guides. I was doing questions. I was learning without. I was learning with my own structure, I would say. So yeah. So the issue was that I wasn't really able to one track how I was going beyond quizzes that I would take on the official guide Wiley tool, and two, the improvement I was seeing was either minimal or non-existent, so it wasn't working out for me. And
Yeah.
to clarify, I was doing the official guide, I was doing the Manhattan prep books, and maybe it was a methodology, but it just wasn't working for me personally.
Got it. So, and let's kind of talk a bit about Rida, who Rida is. So, academically, are you a, I'm for example, academically, I'm a maverick. I know things, but I'm not a, what you would call as someone who scores super high on tests. I do well on competitive exams, but not on tests. Who's Rida?
I'd say I'm above average. I wouldn't say that I do well in my exams
Mhm.
most of the time. When I put when I put the effort into it, I can see the results.
Mhm.
So I come from a humanities background and from a school that has a reputation for scoring us extremely hard.
Mhm.
So that's one thing. But throughout my 10th and my 12th, I didn't do badly in math. I actually did. I got I think, 85, 90 in my 12th grade and a
Mhm.
10 CGPA overall in 10th. So I wouldn't say that I was a weak student, at least in the
I won't say I'm
past.
not a weak
But
student. I'm just not a diligent person if I'm not interested, which is
no, yeah, neither was I. I think the GMAT really in a lot of ways helped me sort of create an extreme work ethic where I put in an extreme amount of hard work. Those 4 months from June till the end of September, I was putting in an insane amount of hours. I deleted my Instagram from my phone. I haven't met my friends in so long. And that was just coming straight off of my final university exams as well. So it was a really stressful and extremely, challenging period, I would say.
Got it. Let me ask this. So, and I think there's a question here, which is I can't see the person's name, but it's a very valid question. So, um, and the question probably if it's the same for all 4 months, then you should specify that. So, but from when you started June to August, and then you say August June to end of July, let's call it that way, just those 2 months where you read the Manhattan books and were solving questions on the official guide, using the official guide, and then August to end of September, which is when you use the e-GMAT part. How many hours per day were you putting in while learning, and how were you able to
Okay.
put in that time?
Okay. So how I was able to put in that time is one that I wasn't taking a job at that point of time. So this entire period was devoted to my GMAT prep. Uh, from June till the end of July, I was spending, I'd say, around 6 or 7 hours, maybe. But again, that varied from day to day a little bit here and there. But when I started the e-GMAT course, because it had that personalized plan, I was consistently putting about, I'd say, 9 to 10 hours every day.
That's
So that
incredible.
was it was I'd wake up at 5:30 in the morning, probably not going to do that again, and sleep at 11. So it was because, again, you can't study. I couldn't study for just a 9-hour block. I had to space it out to actually absorb what I was learning. So that for from August till the end of September, that was what I would do.
So and this is really good information. So just to really paste this piece over there for those of you really asking how many hours do I need? So Rida, so you spend the first 2 months, you actually didn't see a lot of improvement, or maybe you did, but just the data point that I have is on 4th of August, which is when you took our first mock, you had a 540 with a verbal score of 32 and a quant score of 33. And then when you took the final attempt, you had a Q49. So that quant improvement went from a Q33 to a Q49, which is, say, almost perfect, an incredible improvement. And that verbal went from a V32 to a V41, which is again 94th percentile or so. And you slightly underperformed. Did you underperform in quant or verbal when you compare to that 760 mock attempt?
So in the 760, I scored a Q50 and a V42. So I scored 1 point below in each
In
section.
each section, okay.
Yeah, I
Okay.
think I'd attribute that more to the sort of, I took it at a center, so I'd attribute that to the whole test environment and the entire, situation of taking the test for the first time, adapting to that entire setup. I think
Also
also played
the
a role.
equipment was new, the location was
Yeah,
new as well. Yeah,
yeah.
that's true. So that's good to know, in that. And so if you're looking for to really say, a 190-point improvement, and again, incredible improvement in any one section, which is either quant or verbal. In your case, it was quant. For other folks, it could be verbal, and then a reasonably significant improvement on 32 is about what 65th percentile to 41 94th percentile on the verbal side. You're looking at about 190-point improvement is about, in my opinion, 220 to 240 hours of effort. That's kind of what it takes, and good diligent effort the way that is put. And if you are not diligent, you're not going to get that. So let's kind of go back to that end of July, beginning of August timeframe. You put in the effort, the same amount of effort, and you were not seeing improvements. Then why did you choose the e-GMAT course, or how did you go about choosing the e-GMAT course?
So I saw a lot of e-GMAT videos on both YouTube and GMAT Club. But on YouTube, I'd seen this series of videos that Payal had posted, and it was about the necessary skills that you need to tackle quant questions in the GMAT.
So these are the
So
process skills videos, basically the quant process skills. Yes.
yeah. So I watched those and I realized that I wasn't actually employing any of them uh, consciously while doing any GMAT questions. And I didn't know that I had to inculcate these skills in my problem solving process. And then I took a e-GMAT webinar. It was geometry. And so I got access to some of the geometry modules and I got to see sort of what the course consisted of. And I really liked the way that I could track my progress. There were diagnostic quizzes to see where I'd start out. There were practice quizzes, there were practice files, and there was the entire Scolarium cementing quizzes part as well. So all of that really sort of drew me into the e-GMAT course.
Got it. So, uh, just for those of you who want to really get access to quant process skills, Atul, if you can share the quant process skills playlist, that would be great. You can really see the process skills that Rida is talking about. Also, we have, as Atul has shared, an algebra webinar that's this weekend or so, and you can really take a look at that as well. So you went in, you actually took the mock test, you got I have a Q33 and a V32. What did you do next?
Panicked a little bit. I will admit
Did
that
you
there was
expect
an
that score,
initial moment.
first of all?
No, I expected at least, I'd say, a 600 or so. I knew that it wouldn't be great. I knew that I wasn't hitting my targets, but I didn't expect it to be that bad. So I took about, I'd say, 10 minutes to have a complete panic, thinking, what am I doing? And then I realized that I did not have the time to panic according to my own mental timeline. And I realized that, you know what? You can push the panic later. Focus now, study now. And then if your first GMAT attempt doesn't work out, I'll give myself a whole 24 hours to have a complete and utter panic. A whole thing. So I
And you
realized,
panicked because you put in these 2 months, the score hadn't improved, and you said, "Man,
yeah,
I have 2 more months before I got to take the test, and so what's going to change?" Okay, and that's completely understandable, right?
yeah. Because you think, when you're putting in all this effort, you're putting in this time, you're basically, I could have taken a job, I could have been doing something, and seeing other people either go on to their masters or getting a job, that kind of peer pressure of, oh my gosh, I'm not doing anything, also sort of impacted my entire mindset. But then I had to sort of take a step back, realize I'm on my own timeline, not anybody else's. Need to calm down, remind myself why I'm doing this, and then hunker down and figure out my next steps.
I think that's a very important piece. One thing that we fail to recognize with regards to our GMAT preparation is that each one of you is different. And again, this is very different from a school or a college test, where because they're a school or a college test, frankly, is not a test of ability. It's a test of your retention of information. This is a test of ability, and then when it comes to building ability, each one of you is different. And so one of the worst things you can do is compare your progress, not your end score, by the way, but your progress with anyone else, and really just say, hey, that person XYZ could ace the GMAT right away and I could not. In fact, I recently, I think a couple of weeks back, I interviewed someone who took the e-GMAT course, and one of the things that they basically struggled with was that that person's sister could just score 760 on the GMAT like this, and that person took the first attempt and got a 610. It's like,
Oh
how
my
the hell is
gosh.
that happening? And that's kind of where it doesn't matter, and I've been saying that for years. Um, Whether you took longer or less time than someone else, what matters is what's that end score, because that's what you'd be known by. And
Yeah.
so give yourself the space and the time to learn. That's very important. Okay, so
Yeah.
you, again, let's go back. You had that 540. What did you do next?
So I'd taken the e-GMAT course at that point. So I knew that there was a personalized plan tool. So I entered in my mock data, and then I entered in my target score data. And I put my target score data a little higher than what my target score was. I just wanted to score above
What
a
did you put in?
700 at that point. I put 750. I was like, I want to score above a 700. That's my goal. But I was like, okay, if I study, that saying, if you shoot for the moon, you land in the stars. I was like, if I shoot for a 750, maybe I'll get a 710. At that point, I didn't really have a lot of confidence in my ability coming straight out of that mock. So I was like, okay, I'll put in 750. I'll put it in like I'm going to actually get that score, get such a good score, and I'll study that way. And you know what? We'll see where I end up. And over, I think, those 2 months, that my mindset changed from, okay, you know what, maybe I'll get a 700 to, yeah, I'm going to get a 700 plus. Let's just see how much of a
How did it change?
improvement that is. one thing that absolutely helped was being able to track my progress. So you can see on the top of the e-GMAT course your practice score
Mm.
and your I think I
The
forget what the other
concept
one is called.
concept skill
Yeah,
and practice skill
yeah, yeah.
scores. Yeah.
So I saw that going up, and I could feel myself. I watch the video and I take the practice
Mm.
quizzes and the concept quizzes, and I do
Mm.
well. Even if I didn't do well in the practice quiz, I was able to retain
Mm.
whatever I need to learn, whether it was, taking up another point of view,
Mm.
honing on my sort of
Mm.
methodology. All of that worked out, and I
Mm.
could see that improvement. And even when I was taking in the cementing quizzes, again, I was working on a paucity of time, so I didn't get to do a lot of questions, but I honed in on my sort of analysis of what I'd done in the incorrect questions, what I'd done on my
Mm.
correct questions. So I prioritized my quality over quantity, and I started seeing those results when I was doing questions.
Mhm. Okay.
So yeah.
Uh, okay, that's good. And I think just for context over here, I have Rida's account open, and what I you would see on Rida's account is that she actually did the course incredibly well, and I'm going to actually share my screen just to really tell you how well she did. And I think right now I'm sharing this. So I think for me, when I look at this, so this is just the number properties attempt. You can see she's done pretty much all of the course and really good scores. But for me, it's improvement like this that makes it. So in the LCM and GCD GMAT skills diagnostic, she got a 37%. But then this GMAT skills diagnostic actually is mated to this GMAT skills practice quiz and see the kind of improvement that she has had over here, 67%. So someone who scores 67% is already at about that 75th percentile over here. And again, even prior to this, really good scores in this case. And so I think this is what makes things great. Similarly, DNR diagnostic quiz as well as practice skills. I mean, this is an incredible improvement. And really, I'm going to just stop sharing. But I mean, this is what I call as a diligence of a student. And as we were doing this, um, when you got in the divisibility and remainders one, when you got that 11%, were you worried?
No, I think by that time I'd already finished my verbal, and when I was doing quant, I realized that okay, there's no point in me panicking on where I am right now.
Mm.
I did not have the time nor the mental space to panic about where I am. All I
Mm.
can do is put all my energy towards improving. So I didn't, quite frankly, I was like, to myself, I would say, you don't have the time or space to panic about this right now, and you can't change it. You are here right now. What next steps you take will determine where you're going to be.
Okay.
So accepting, I think that's important as well, accepting where you are and accepting that that need not be your final point, that there is always scope for improvement when you put in the work, is very important. If you don't think you can improve, you're not going to improve. That mindset when taking the GMAT is extremely important.
Oh, it's absolutely important. So I want to just ask this question, and I think that's a two-pronged question, which is the first question is, you have this incredible improvement in quant. So for someone who's not strong in quant, okay, um, in your opinion, what are a few things or a few, I call them chasms or gaps that you need to overcome to become strong in quant, first of all?
Okay. The first one I'd say is your fear of quant. Coming in from a non quant background or not having done math in a long time and being faced with this section in the GMAT, I don't think you should be afraid, because the GMAT quant section is not your 10th or 12th grade math exam. You are not required to write out all these steps to put in these exact particular formula to get your correct answer. It's a test of logic, and it's a test of how you apply certain processes to
Mm.
arrive to a conclusion. I think for the data sufficiency questions, you don't need to know every single step, and you don't need to know you don't need to do every single calculation. A lot of the times, it's as simple as reading the question stem, realizing, okay, I need three variables. Looking at the first stem, realizing it's giving me only one. That's not sufficient immediately.
Mhm.
Reading the second one, saying it's giving me two, a different two, and then putting them together and saying, okay, are these going to give me a viable answer? And all of those work out really quickly. So moving away from this pure math kind of mindset towards a pure logic mindset is extremely important. And I think that logic is something that anyone learns. If you, when you're fresh out of college, you must have used logic somewhere, whether that's just figuring out which classes are best to bunk, or figuring out how you're going to submit this assignment on time. You know, you use logic in everyday life. You just have to change that mindset to using it in the GMAT.
So GMAT quant is not about quant, it's about my. I mean, the beauty about this is, when you were explaining this, um, and I didn't create the quant course. Payal did, which is you hear Payal's voice, and I think she would be so proud to have someone express, someone who's not from a quant background, express how to go about the DS approaches and so succinctly. I mean, it just shows the confidence that you've had, in
And that's
terms of.
thanks to Payal. Sometimes I can still hear Payal's voice in my head. I've watched her consistently for 2 months, and when I'm faced with a problem, I'm like, okay, what are the variables? What can I infer from this? What's my manipulation of data gonna look like? So sticks with you.
Yeah. And so then, what were you? But then, when you read the Manhattan books prior to joining e-GMAT, how was your approach to quant different than what you just described?
Okay, so the way I did the quant course there was I would go through the chapters, do the questions in the end, and I just do that for every chapter. And once I
That's
finished
a
the
diligent
entire
student,
book,
by the way. The fact that you're doing the questions in the end because you weren't forced to do those questions.
no, no, I think that's just a kudos to all my math teachers in grade school. But I do those questions, and then I think I can't remember it anymore actually, but I think there as well it's divided into arithmetic
Yeah.
and
So you
algebra and
have
all of that.
6 books, yeah.
Yeah. So I do the entirety of arithmetic, and then I do those questions in the OG using the Wiley tool. So the issue was that a lot of the questions I faced in the Wiley tool, I just didn't know how to answer. I didn't know how to approach these questions. And uh, my score was like 55%, 60%. I wasn't hitting an 80 plus, which is what I wanted. And that's where I realized that, something's not right. I'm either I'm learning incorrectly, or this methodology just isn't for me.
So
So I think
even though you say you're weak in quant, but you're someone who's very logical because you looked at this and said, hey, the data doesn't make sense. So this approach clearly isn't working for me. Now, when you did the same thing, with the e-GMAT courses, were you able to hit those 80%?
yeah, a lot. I did well in my cementing quizzes over time. And I think one thing that really helped me in the e-GMAT course that I wasn't doing when I did the Manhattan Prep books was that I had an error log. So that forced me to really evaluate how I was answering these questions and where I was going wrong. So that kind of interrogation of my own methodology helped me refine my my
How did you get
question and
this
answer
error log?
process. I watched your videos on the
Oh,
Scholarium, so I followed that. What do you say, that format. The quant one, so I would have the question, I would have the answer I chose, and I'd have the correct answer, and then I'd evaluate, okay, was it a concept issue? Did I not get this concept right? Or was it a process issue? Did I maybe skip a case? Did I not manipulate the
did
data
not consider all
appropriately?
cases. Did not. So what were the? So I think this is interesting, and I think Shweta, who did the error log, if I remember correctly, would be very happy to hear that. So what were the? So first of all, were you missing questions because of conceptual gaps or process issues, process skills?
I'd say in the beginning it was 50-50 of both, but as I moved on, it was mostly process skills, because that's learning a concept is somewhat easier than figuring out how to answer a question appropriately, I think. So being consciously considering, say, a zero case was something that I continuously made this error, I think, for number properties, where I forget to consider a case where the variable is equal to zero. But after I made that mistake, say 2 or 3 times, I realized I'd remember my previous answers. So I'd be like, okay, this is what you forgot, and this is what you have to remember when you answer these questions next. And past the point, I didn't make that mistake ever again. I didn't
So,
forget to
first
consider it.
initial, there's one process skill that you lagged in was consider all cases, and the specific case was the zero case, and then once you documented it 2 or 3 times,
Yeah.
there's a, was there another process skill where you faltered and that you fixed?
Uh, I think inference was somewhat
Hmm.
an issue a little bit, and
Hmm.
manipulation of data. So
Hmm.
I wasn't sure how exactly I should manipulate the data to get the answer that I
Hmm.
wanted. But that way, watching the video solutions of the questions really helped because I
Hmm.
was able to sort of see the process in application and inculcate that methodology in my own answer taking process. And for inference, sometimes I go a little too beyond the question. I wouldn't stick to what's given. I'd start thinking way beyond, unnecessarily
Hmm.
so, and waste time. So I'd be like, so I'd have to think, okay, this is all I have. This is all I really need to deal with.
Hmm.
What is extra is a very limited set that you already know exists. So just work with that information.
Good. That's really good. Now I want to ask a couple of other questions. So someone who, and this is, I mean, the question that will apply to whichever section you're weak in. In your case, it is quant, and in some other person's case, it may be verbal. So when people struggle with a particular section, it's not just about answering questions; it's also about the timing piece around that.
Yeah.
First of, did you initially struggle with quant timing, and
I
maybe it's
struggled with
verbal timing?
I struggled with timing for both. I had a really hard time sort of staying to that 2 minutes or 1.5 minutes that's appropriate. It was extremely difficult for me to not continuously attempt a question that I was stuck at thinking, okay, maybe if I just take another 10, 15 seconds, I can answer this.
Mhm.
So, one thing that was really important when I was doing the e-GMAT course was fixing those timing errors.
How did you go about it?
One one thing that was extremely important was the issue that caused those errors was, one, I just didn't know how to solve the questions. I didn't know what process skills to apply.
Mhm.
Once I got those, it was more about, staying extremely conscious of the clock, keeping one eye on the question, one eye on the clock while you're doing the test or while you're doing any question. And then I would sort of, if it came to a point where I just didn't know the answer and I was reaching maybe a 2 minute mark, I'd just
Mhm.
guess. I'd be down to maybe two options and I'd be like, it's not worth the rest of your questions. Just stay another 15 to 20 seconds here. Go with your gut, take it, and then move on.
So just to really clarify this, did you do this in the beginning when you were using the e-GMAT course, or were someone you were already, somewhat through the e-GMAT course?
No, when I did the concepts on the e-GMAT course, it was all about learning the content, the concepts, as well as the process skills. That was the only thing that was important because I couldn't be only 50% there and then fix
Mhm.
my timing. There would be an
Mhm.
extreme
Yeah.
mismatch. So I focused, I got all my concepts in order, and then I
Mhm.
worked on my timing. And already when I had all those skills, when I had that inventory, going into fixing my timing was a lot easier and I had to put a lot less effort.
Yeah,
So,
and that's
step
very, very
one, have your
important.
foundation.
So don't focus on timing when you're learning content. It's really
Yeah,
important. Why? Because you're learning content. That's kind of where you have to say, I've got to get this question right. That's what I call as your struggle phase, where you're not worried about timing, but you're worried about getting questions right and learning. Now, once you have that inventory of process skills and concepts built into your mind, once you go into that test readiness phase, that's when you need to really start worrying about timing, and that's very important over here. Okay,
yeah.
um, that's critical. Now, did you write to the EGMAT team during this time?
Only I think I had a technical issue once, but mostly it was just piling the videos and myself. That was all that it was. It was
Okay.
what really sort of pushed me was that I had created that plan and I had to reach I had to reach that goal in that particular time. So I had to finish the entirety of SC in 4 days because
Okay.
I think 3 or 4 days. So I was like, okay, there are so many videos, you need to hit these many this on one day so that you can take a day for the cementing quizzes.
Mhm.
So a lot of it was self motivation. I mean, I think that's extremely vital. Even if you take a course like the e-GMAT, if you're not motivated yourself to put in the time and the effort, it's not going to work. you know?
It's not these are two essential pillars. I mean, and the entire roof would cave in if one of these pillars is not there, if you don't have a plan and if you don't have the motivation. I mean, no one can bring in the motivation out there.
Yeah,
And the GMAT's not something which your parents would just force and say study.
yeah.
It has to be intrinsic.
Yeah,
So
exactly. If it's not like you have to remember a bunch of concepts and
mm,
go into the test and vomit it out. You have to
mm,
consciously inculcate certain skills and
mm,
certain sort of mind maps
mm.
into your studying process and into your question taking process for you to see a valuable result, right? And that's not something that someone else can put into you. I mean, the
We're
best
talking
someone
about
else can
good
do.
habits there, Rida. So I think there's one good habit that you should talk about. You have this favorite notebook. What is that? Can you tell us? And can you
Yes.
show us that notebook?
So it's this. I think it's about 300 pages, and it's
Mhm.
all the notes that I took during the e-GMAT course. Which that it is.
Okay.
Yeah. So all of this is my quant, my verbal, everything, except my AWA. All of it, everything is in here.
So what did you do? I mean, how are these useful?
So one,
So first of all, what did you
what's
do, and then second is how are these
okay.
useful?
Okay, so for every video that I watched, I note down the key points. So for SC, for SC, those notes are the most diligent because that every process you have to take. Say for the mastering comprehension, building blocks of a sentence, I have for every single video, I have notes. So I have
Wow.
the first video, the second video, I have all of that. So what it would help is it would help me so that when I had to revise towards the end, when I had to sort of brush up on my concepts, I didn't have to go back and watch the video because that is the time consuming process. And that's something that you give time to when you're learning, but when you just need to really quickly brush up on the concepts,
So
it
when you're in
won't
the
help.
test readiness phase, you just go back, look at your notebook, and say,
Yeah. Yeah. So, and for quant, something that I did is um, for every question type that I'd encounter, I'd note down an example. So I
"Hmm,
have examples for simultaneous motion. I have examples for okay, if you divide this number by this number, what's the remainder or what's the last digit, so on and so forth. So I have all of those in my notebook. So at any point of time when I'm studying and when I'm sort of evaluating my performance, if there's a question I'm stuck on, usually something will help here. So I didn't have to navigate the entire course at the end. And also putting everything that I was learning on paper was something that helped me remember better. So now it's a little difficult, but when I was ready for the GMAT, I could recite almost every rule for SC. I could tell you, what sentence structures to use, what meaning
hmm,
to use, what are the exceptions, what
hmm."
verbs you can use on subjunctive, all of those I remembered. So that was a combination of the note taking and just a revision.
Got it. And so one of the things that's very critical, I think, which a lot of people don't recognize, is some people ask us, "Hey, why don't we provide summary files?" We actually do provide summary files in Quant. They're super detailed, but we still recommend that people take notes because essentially, the notes that you take are the areas where you feel that are where you're not as strong naturally in. So first, the process of note taking
Yeah,
strengthens those areas, and the second thing which is very important is that you're not as strong at those. We don't know that, and so I think that's something which is super important. Okay,
yeah.
so
And I
uh,
think, sorry.
yeah,
And I
no, go
think
ahead. That
also the
was
note taking helps you because you put it down the way that you understand, right? If you take the notes that the e-GMAT course gives you, it's the way that they've taught and it's the way that, they've understood the course.
you're doing the
But
translation aspect.
yeah, you're doing the translation. So I have little notes on all the corners, okay? For examples, like always singular in number. None of this makes sense when I read it out, but it was all these things that I'd noticed when I was doing questions, when I was doing watching the videos, like, okay, Pyle says this, but what it means when I want to do a quick revision, what I've understood is this and this and this. And then I'd reaffirm that when I was doing the practice quizzes. I'd come back and be like, okay, I wrote this down, but what it actually means and what I maybe have had a concept gap in is it actually means that I'm supposed to do this step, not this step. So it was
These are
about,
actual little memory maps in many ways.
Yeah. So all of that is, I think, really important. The note taking was extremely helpful because it was a physical reflection of what I learned, you
Mm.
know, watching videos, and it forced me to stay present while I was learning. I had to take notes, so I had to pay attention to the videos. So I had to watch the videos with my full focus and paying attention to every single thing that was said so that I didn't have to come back later and watch the videos all over again.
Just to really tell you, I mean, so the Rida is obviously taking a lot of notes, and how important I consider taking notes is I have this notebook which is just for taking notes. There's a pen over here. I just use this. There's no other use in this notebook except taking notes, and that's, I mean, how important I consider. Why? Because essentially, when you are learning something, you want to write things down, and again, for me, carrying around notebooks is a bit difficult because I'll look at so many different things. But that physical notion of having something physical where you're writing with your hand, that's very, very important when it comes to learning new things. Um, okay, so I want to just talk about something else. So we talked a lot about quant. Let's talk about verbal. What are the key areas that you needed to improve on verbal? Because you did improve from a V32 to a V41, and then how long did it take for did that improvement take?
So for me, I did quite well in RC actually. I think I did, and I got an 80% when I took my 540 mark. But
Yes.
the SC and the RC was where SC and the CR was where I was falling short. So SC, you can see there was a real improvement. CR not so much, but so again, like I said, I was working on a positive time. So I put in a lot of effort into the SC because I knew, okay, this is something that's related to meaning and it's a
Mhm.
process. You need to look through the question, you need to understand the question, you need to understand the pain points, and you need to fix those, right?
Mhm.
So I figured out that process. So I put in a lot of effort. And I took, I think, the entire verbal section. And I, again, for these also, I went through, I think, every single video, did every single
Yeah, I saw that. You were very
diagnostics,
diligent. Yes.
uh, except in RC, again, which,
Mhm. You were at
RC
85th
came,
percentile in that mark. I saw that just now.
yeah, RC came a lot more naturally to me because, again, as a literature student, as a humanities student, I'd done a lot of reading and inferring, so all of that came in really well, and that reflected even in my final uh, actual test as well. But SC was not something that I'd done in a while. It's not really your focus when you're doing literature in college, right? So I focused on that, and CR as well. I did give a lot of my effort into it, but I sort of knew that if there was an area that was going to be a problem for me while I was taking the GMAT, it would likely be the CR section. So
Mhm.
I gave my best, but I was like, okay, this might not be something that you'll reach a 90th percentile in, but the other two, you absolutely can do this. So I put in a lot of effort there as well. I was very strategic about where I was putting in my effort, right? Because
And that's the
again,
study plan
there's
piece.
yeah. So again, that's something that was extremely important. Figuring out where I can improve, absolutely. Like for quant, I knew, I know I can do the math and do the logic. So I put in a lot of effort there, and that paid off. For the CR, I had a lot of problems sort of understanding the methodology and understanding how to work it in. So I was like, okay, you know what? It's fine if you're not 100% in this. Just do better than you're doing right now. Do the best that you can, and absolutely, hit it out of the park everywhere else. Which is
Just
which
to
is what I did.
translate what Rida is saying, and Rida is this. I mean, this shows that Rida is very humble when she says that. I'm going to just talk about two things here. First of all, uh, uh, and CR, she started from a 36th percentile, and this is where she says, okay, I'm going to hit it out of the park, and SC and RC. You can see the target abilities. This is your study plan, Rida, right?
Yeah.
But in CR, you're no slouch. You are aiming for that 84th percentile, which is there, and which is, again, it's not the 90th, but it's still very good. And when I look at your CR attempt, I mean, to your in your account, mm, the stats, if I remember, were pretty good. I
Yeah,
mean, these are
stats were pretty
incredible
good.
stats.
Yeah.
So that's very good overall. Let me just stop sharing so that the craziness of that mirror effect goes away. uh
But I think, it really shows in my final performance. If you see my ESR, I got 100% of the questions right for RC, and I think I was 99th percentile in SC, right?
Hmm.
So again, that
What was your
mindset really
CR?
played.
I'm curious too.
CR was a 52,
52.
mildly
Okay.
embarrassed about that. But again, I had to be strategic. I
Hmm.
didn't have 55 days, like you said, is not a lot of time. And
Yes.
my focus was a lot more on the quant section where I had to get this huge jump to a 48 or 49,
Yes.
right? So I was like, you don't have enough resources to give a huge amount of effort to your CR.
Hmm.
Work with what you have, do your best, and we'll see where it goes.
I think if you spend 10 days on CR, I think we can get you to the 90th percentile right away.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yes.
Again, see, that's the thing. I can sit and I can say that, like, yes, if I put in maybe another 10 days of concentrated effort, I can get to that. I can get a better score on this CR. That's a mindset that you need to have. You need to believe that you can do better. I know I've said this before, but when I didn't have that mindset, I wasn't seeing the output. Nobody else is going to believe that you can hit of 700 plus if
Hmm.
you don't believe in it first. You have to take that first step because you're the one taking the exam. You can watch the e-GMAT videos, your parents can believe in you, your friends can believe in you, but you're the one writing the test. You have to put in the effort. You're the one who
And,
has to learn.
and just to really translate what you're saying, believing in yourself, what that does is when you make a mistake, you don't panic. You actually do a strategic review like you did, right? And you
Yeah,
really say, why did I make a mistake? And let me figure out how not to make that mistake rather than saying, oh man, I did not get this right. What the
yeah,
hell? How the hell am I going to improve? Don't go into that mindset. Go into the mindset of why did I get it wrong? And it's okay to make a mistake. Remember, when you're learning, it's a safe environment. And the questions are there, some questions at least that you're making a mistake. What's criminal is you repeating that mistake.
yeah.
So
It's important to realize that when you make a mistake, you've not hit a ceiling, right? There are still more steps to go. You just have to you have to realize for yourself that you can hit, you know, you can hit a better score. You can get this question right. If you're getting only a 600 question right now, you're not hitting those 700 level questions. You can hit those scores. It's not an impossibility. You have to realize that you've not reached your limit, that there's still a whole lot of space for you to learn because you're only at the learning phase.
I'll tell you what I do in terms of, and again, my mindset is very different because I have to be an expert. So in CR and RC, when I make a mistake, the first thing is I celebrate. It's like, because that's where I learn something, right? I mean, if you're getting things right, then you're not learning anything,
You're
right?
just reaffirming your own.
You're just reaffirming what you know. There's no benefit to that. I mean, in your case, there is because you've not reaffirmed, but for me, I've reaffirmed enough. But when I make a mistake, I really say, okay, there's something to learn. Either I'm going to be proven wrong or I'm going to prove the question wrong. And that's fun.
It's a
Okay.
space for growth.
It's a space for growth, exactly. And then you say, okay, I dive deep, do a really deep dive into a question. 9 out of 10 times, it's I make a mistake when I make a mistake because official questions are not wrong. 1 out of 10 times, I still prove that they're wrong, and I find a parallel question and then say, if this is a logic that worked there, and this can't work here, and logically this won't, but that happens 1 out of 10 times. But those 9 out of 10 times when it's my mistake, I actually go on and create a parallel question. And
Yeah,
then I send that question to all the SMEs within e-GMAT to really say, now go solve this question. Because if
yeah,
I made a mistake on something, some of the other SMEs might have made a mistake over there. And we then put some of those questions on the e-GMAT platform as well to really say, okay, let's kind of test this concept as well. And
yeah.
so I
And
think you've
what you're
got to
doing
do
is
that level of diligence.
Yeah. What you're doing is you're not going back to the question and looking at the answer and saying, oh my gosh, I knew that. It's so easy. Why didn't I get it right? That's not what neither you nor I are doing. We're looking at it, we're seeing it as a potential for growth. We're seeing where we've gone
You
wrong, where
have
we
to
need to
acknowledge
improve.
the mistake. It's really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah. You don't have the space to say that, oh, I just copied the question wrong. I was having, I didn't go about it right. But I'll do it right next time. You
Yeah.
can't just fly by with that assurance. You have to put in the work to really understand. I didn't copy the question right. Okay, that's a copy error. I need to be more focused when I'm reading my question. Oh, I didn't do a process right. Okay, what did I not do right? Did I not infer correctly? Did I not manipulate the data correctly? You have to evaluate yourself at every point of getting the question wrong, so you never get a similar question wrong ever again.
Yeah, or in other words, the more time you spend on every question where you make a mistake, the fewer mistakes you make, the faster you improve. Which kind of is the next piece over here, which is, I think, a great question, I think, which is to really say, okay, if you're facing timing issues, and this is the person's facing timing issues in cementing and couldn't pass a 70% threshold, which is shows indicates medium cementing, any suggestion? Having gone through this, I don't know how many medium cement is you've gone through, but let's first get your take on it, then I'll take my take on it.
Okay. One, if you're not getting above 70% on your timing, figure out which are really holding you back. Okay, so if it's an SC, if you're spending too much time on every single modifier question, if that's your pain point, then go back, review those concepts, take another quiz, and see if you're actually seeing any improvement, right? Or if you're consistently taking a lot of time on every single question, I think you need to evaluate whether one, are you just spending a lot of time overthinking, are you sort of hesitating, because you don't have the time for hesitation, you know. It's a cutthroat exam, you don't have the time for hesitation. Or is it an overall, are you lacking the confidence, are you lacking the process skills, are you just not focusing on the time at all? Because I'm sure that at least a couple of people will just be doing the questions without an eye on the clock. So figuring out that, okay, one eye here, one eye there is also really important.
Yeah. So here's something that I would say. So, Rida, great response, by the way. Given the fact where you're coming from, it's a really good response. I think, a response that's way better than what I've seen most students give. So I think the thing that you have got to recognize is timing is an outcome. The cause is not timing. It's like fever is usually an outcome. The cause is a viral infection or a bacterial infection. Okay. So when you take longer to solve any question, you take longer because A, you missed an aspect of the meaning, and we're going to just focus on in the context of SC. Because you missed an aspect of the meaning, you go through answer choices, you're stuck between two answer choices because you can't reject one. Okay. And because of that, you take longer. So in that case, what's your corrective action? I'm going to slow down while reading the original sentence, and I'm going to make sure I extract all the aspects. Now sometimes you extract all the aspects, but you don't take those aspects um, essentially while evaluating the answer choices. So even though you did the meaning piece, while evaluating the answer choices, you did not really say, hey, this is what the author intended to say, this is what the author actually is saying through this answer choice. And in that case, again, you do end up doing the back and forth. So what you end up doing, which is the fever piece, is the same. The reason why you make a mistake, which is why the strategic review process is could be very, very different. So like Rida, do that strategic review process the way Rida did in Quant, and figure out why you're making the mistake. In your case, Rida, you were making the zero error, and
Mhm.
and yeah, in many other cases, um, you know. Uh, 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 Other people make different kinds of errors, but in the end what that leads to is an inability to narrow it down to that one final choice, which is why you take the timing as outcome. So that's what I would say. Do the strategic review process in this case. Okay.
Yeah.
The other piece which is there, after doing the full course, how many times did you repeat the course? I don't think you did a whole lot of repetition on the course.
No, maybe I guess I maybe watched one video or two or did a practice quiz again, but I didn't really go back and do entire sections all over again. I did maybe a strategic again. I did a strategic revision of
Hmm.
certain pain points, but that's about it. I
Okay.
didn't really go back a lot.
Yeah, I mean, no one goes back essentially and does that. Um, and the good thing is, if you've studied the course properly, you won't do it again. And again, if you've not studied it, you will have to do it again. It's just
Yeah,
about the quality of your initial of attempt. And we give, when you go through the SC course, Rida, you would have gotten congratulatory videos saying, hey, you are you're doing well after the modifiers module, or there are just a couple of files that you should go revise again because in practice quizzes you didn't do as well. And
I
and
got
and
those for quant actually. I
for
got quite a
quant,
few for
when you
quant.
when you
Yeah,
did the got the low diagnostic score, you would have said, don't worry about it. And then
yeah.
when you got the high GMAT skill score, you would have said, hey, congratulations, you are,
Congratulations. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So we do tell you that in this case, and that's very very important. Data will tell you after every SC file if you're not doing things right.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to take this question. What's the highest percentile? Oh, multiple perfect scores in NCR. So if you look at our YouTube channel, you'll see many of those perfect scores out there. Okay. Let's look at a couple of other questions. We are already 50 minutes into the session. We actually didn't even get to know. Time spent between quant and verbal during the 2 months when you used e-GMAT.
I think actually you have that data on the preparation
Or
plan.
you
That's
just
what I
followed the
stuck to.
plan?
Yeah, yeah. No, I didn't go beyond that plan at all. You can see on Quant that I've sort of reduced the number of days. It's not
It's,
reduced the number of hours I spent in a day. That's not
Hmm.
because I actually spent fewer hours. It just took me longer, and I didn't
Hmm.
want to go through the whole plan creation thing again. So I just
Okay.
modified there to sort of. So I
So
think I spent 2 weeks. I don't
let me just
remember on
share my
verbal.
screen again. So this is the plan. You can see about 3 weeks here for quant in this case, but you are studying intensively. And
Yeah,
then
I don't think you're sharing your screen
I'm not
actually.
sharing my screen. Oh, sorry about that. Uh, and here, let's go here. So about 3 weeks on quant is what I see over here, and then what another 2 weeks on verbal is what you
Wish,
have.
yeah, yeah.
And one other thing I think that's very important here is that I'm going to go to the calendar view. You can see the number of hours she's spending. So this is not for a typical student. Okay.
Yeah.
And and you can see all of this here. You didn't spend enough. So I see you modified these hours here. This is the modification that you did, right?
No, so I actually manipulated this a little bit to suit my own needs.
Hmm.
So what I did is if I would put in the hours, but sometimes some concepts would require a little bit of additional time or a little bit of
Hmm.
additional understanding. So I'd reduce the number of hours in the day that I'd actually spent. So it would add another
Ah,
calendar day.
this was the new
So I
learning
would,
hours.
yeah, yeah. So then I'd still be able to follow the plan properly, but it would better reflect the actual reality of what I was doing.
That's being honest with yourself, to be very frank. I mean, that's really good that you were honest with yourself in that regards
Yeah.
or so. So yeah. Um, Here's another question: is it better to take a Sigma X GMAT prep mock or a Sigma X mock? I think both have their own benefits. So yeah, why
Yeah.
don't you answer this and then
I
I'm gonna.
I wanted to save my GMAT prep mocks. I didn't want to because I know that they work with a limited question pool. So I didn't want to take that and then have to reset it at the end. And I knew without a doubt that I needed to take some course. And I liked the GMAT methodology and everything. So I took the course and then I took the Sigma X mock.
Yeah. The other
So
piece
yeah,
which is there is with Sigma X, you get the ability scores. With the GMAT prep, you won't get the ability scores. So you won't know where to put in how much effort.
yeah.
So I would say Sigma X mock will give you way more insights than a GMAT prep mock will, essentially. Um, how many mocks did you take? And I want to actually add to this question. When did you take those mocks?
So after I'd finished my stage 1 and stage 2, and when I moved into the test readiness phase, I took 4 mocks.
Hmm,
And all of them were the GMAT official mocks.
hmm,
So I took the first one on the 12th of September, and I scored a
hmm.
730 with the exact breakup that I got on my final exam actually.
Oh,
After that,
49 and 41. Okay.
yeah, after that I took 2 days to again do an error log, do the whole revision process, figure out where I'd gone wrong. And an interesting thing that I will say is throughout my 4 mocks, I didn't do badly in CR. I got very few CR questions incorrect, so I was a bit miffed at the final ESR. So I took one on the 12th, on the 15th, on the, I think, 18th or 19th, and then on the 22nd, if I'm not wrong. And the
And the
last
fine.
one was a 760
And what was your uh, 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 um, essentially your when was your official test? Sorry,
on the 27th of September.
on the
I
27th.
took it at the center. We had a really good center here in Bangalore, so that's where I went.
Okay, got it. The question was the improvement on the e-GMAT mocks. I don't think Rida took
Yeah.
any other e-GMAT mocks. She actually just took this. So Rida, remember, she had 2 months to prepare practically, or less, fewer than 2 months, because 5th of August to 26th of September. And so you did the e-GMAT course. When I look at the data now, it's more or less around what 11th or September or so, which is when you started taking mocks.
Yeah.
That right?
So after that, I'd only revisit the course material if I had
Doubt.
certain pain points or if I wasn't
Hmm.
clear on something. I think that was more for quant for specific questions. I'd go back and
Yes.
look at the process again. But yeah.
Yes. So and there are lots of questions around starts around the e-GMAT course. I'm going to actually share, because Rida's account and Rida's access is slightly it's not super typical because of the paucity of time Rida had and the amount of content that Rida had to consume.
I
So her
study.
stage one is excellent. When I
Yeah.
look at it, her stage two is very good, but there's not enough stage two, frankly, that I
Yeah.
would recommend anyone to look at this. Okay, but here is an excellent account if you want to really look at how people who do this do stage one and stage two, which is something that you guys can look at. And I think this would tell you the stats that someone has. Rida practically did some of stage two here, but she was super diligent around this, and her call stats were very good. With I think you did about 150 questions in both Quant and Bobbles Colonium each, around
Yeah.
about that or so.
I would have done more, but again, I didn't really have a lot of time. And so it was the whole quality over quantity approach that
Yeah.
I had to take considering my situation.
But you
If
didn't do a
maybe
whole
I'd
lot of
start,
questions elsewhere too. You just took four other mocks other than this.
yeah, and a couple of, and some of the OG questions as well with the 2021 guide. But yeah, I didn't have the time to do a whole lot of questions. So I had to really focus a lot on getting the process, the concept right, and then figuring out the quality over quantity approach for the actual answering of questions.
And this shows two things. One is, by the way, if you know what you're doing and if you're focused on it and if you don't deviate, success comes, number one. Number two, you don't need to do thousands and thousands of questions to get to that score. You just need to build that quality in both process and concepts. And you need to hit the metrics, because your stage one metrics are excellent to get there. So that's very, very important. So Vignesh, to your question, stage two cementing quizzes, I think look at the account that I shared. That's uh, uh, that's something which will tell you what are the stats that you should aim for in this case. Okay. Um, Performance in stage two, were you demotivated at some point? So I think the demotivated part during your preparation, were you ever demotivated? And if it was, how did you actually address that?
Yeah, there were definitely pockets where I'd either see these like, amazing success stories
Mm,
on GMAT Club or YouTube where people would be like, I just did the OG and I scored a 760. It's absolutely amazing. Or
mm,
I'd see my peers going and either they've already started their masters in whatever field or they're working, and I'm just sitting in a room and I'm doing all these questions, and I felt really demotivated there. Or when I was doing my cementing, I think I didn't do quite well on the RC at all. I did
mm,
really badly on the RC cementing quizzes. And at that
mm,
point, I was extremely frustrated because it wasn't that, because I knew that I could do a whole lot better. And then I shifted that from a complaint of, oh my God, I can do a whole lot better to, oh my God, I can do a whole lot better. Right?
it's
So
the
a lot of
positivity
it,
you got to bring in.
yeah, a lot of it was consciously shifting my mindset from seeing something as a drawback to seeing it as a learning opportunity. And I make it sound really easy right now, but it required a lot of effort on my part, and I had an amazing support system through all of this. One of my friends is also taking the GMAT, and my parents and
I was
my
going to
entire
ask you about the
family.
support system.
Yeah, I think it's extremely important to surround yourself with people who believe that you can do it and who support you every step of the way.
Mm,
Right? Because you don't exist in this bubble of just yourself at your desk studying. It's important to, one, remind yourself that the outside world exists, and two, remind yourself that the outside world exists beyond just the GMAT club or YouTube where people are constantly being like, I scored a 760, I got into Wharton, or and all of that. And another thing I think that demotivated me a little bit was that if you see the typical Indian pool, it's usually engineers, and I am not anything close to that. So I thought these people have done science, they're leagues ahead of me. How am I going to play catch up? And then I was like, and then I reminded myself, I'm not writing an engineering exam. I'm writing the GMAT, and it's a pretty even field as far as we're all concerned. And I have strengths, right? I know that I can hit RC out of the park, SC, all of that, and that's something that other people might struggle with. I already have. I'm one step ahead that way. I just need to play catch up a little bit somewhere else.
That's
So
true. And
that
I
and
think that's very, very important to say. I want to just go back to those people who say who score 760 with just doing the OG. And yes, those people exist, but those are people who have very, very strong foundation.
yeah.
I'm going to actually tell you a personal story where my daughter's in the ninth grade here in the US, and she has had a fantastic education. I mean, we always focus on logic, and so this year she was supposed to take the PSAT, and she
Hmm.
was so and just she took that PSAT this Tuesday, if I remember, the past Tuesday or the Tuesday before, I don't remember, but one of those Tuesdays. And the reason I'm saying that is that so the Sunday before the PSAT, so it's like 2 days before the exam, she didn't know anything about it. She didn't even know the format of it. So she took her first mock test, and the SAT or the PSAT, very similar to the GMAT, has a quant and verbal section. Both the sections are from 800. So the difference is
Hmm.
you have the entire test in the GMAT from 800. It's just quant and verbal, but the stuff scales up
Hmm.
within 2 days just by practicing questions on a practice test. We still don't have an official score, but on the
Okay.
practice test on her verbal section, um, and again, this is someone who's not done our courses, just the logical approach. She was able to improve to a 90th percentile on verbal in 2 days.
Yeah. See, that's amazing. I can't
And that's
even
amazing,
imagine
but
the
that's not a
amount of
regular person, by the way.
yeah.
And
Yeah,
and
I remember in school people would put in
mm,
a lot of effort into their
mm,
SAT and PSAT
mm,
preparation. I didn't personally write it because I wasn't
mm,
looking to go abroad at that time. But I remember that it was something that people put a lot of effort and time into. So 2 days is
and this is a ninth grader who's just put in
an
2 days of
outlier.
effort. But you can't call it 2 days of effort because this is an outcome of years of logical approach towards reading comprehension, towards sentence correction, or completion in the case of the SAT. And that's or and writing, to really say how do you write and structure things properly. And those years of effort is because she's done multiple research papers on various figures who are important in American history. And when you do that, you have to logically structure your arguments. And and so even though she doesn't know ABC of critical reasoning, she can actually refute the arguments I make. And that's what led to those scores. So for those people who do well on the GMAT just by practicing the OG, these are people who have that foundation and do
Yeah,
that, and it's no surprise they do well. But if you don't have that foundation, you have to build it. And the good thing about the GMAT is it's very logical.
yeah,
Also.
that's true.
I want to just talk about this piece over here, which is the CR piece, and why did you make mistakes on the real exam? The question is, if if you did really well on the mocks, and yeah. So what is your hypothesis? And then I have a hypothesis. And by the way, to really say how much can people improve in 20 days, I'm going to share this link where you can see this guy improve from 35th percentile to 97th percentile in about 14 days or so. But yeah.
Honestly, I think one thing that really sort of set me off, I did the GMAT as I first studied verbal, quant, and then the IR and AWA.
Mm,
So I came into the test center. It was at 7:30 in the morning, and the whole screen setup, everything was a little bit jarring in the beginning. And honestly, I'm really not sure exactly where I fell short. I'm not very surprised because I knew it was my weak section. I'm surprised it was this bad, but I'm not
yeah, it
surprised
was
it
a
was my worst
weaker
section.
section, not your weak section, by the way.
Yeah, my weaker section.
Yeah.
Um, I would say it was a combination of maybe the whole stress of the environment. I had taken the mocks at 8 a.m. to sort of simulate that test environment.
Mm,
Um, but I don't know.
Yeah,
I
and you
guess
did really
maybe,
well in those mocks.
yeah, I did really well in those mocks. I did. This was my mom's advice. She's like, if you're writing the test at 8 a.m., take all your mocks at 8 a.m. so that when the day comes, you're not sleepy and, dying for a caffeine hit at that moment. So, what's your
My here
hypothesis?
is what my guess is, to be really, and this is something that has happened with me. I don't know if this has personally happened with you, but this happened with me in my entrance test when I was for undergrad. I was really strong in physics, because of which I actually, in that last 20 days, I didn't study a whole lot of physics. I was like, this is something which is a piece of cake, and
Oh,
and I screwed up my physics in my
oh no.
entrance test, and it was just because I didn't study. I did quant and chemistry, and or math and chemistry as we call it then,
Mhm,
um, and I did really well there. But physics
mhm.
messed up, and essentially, if you've been doing really well on mock tests, you have a notion of really saying, okay, I'm not going to focus as much on it as I do on other things, and sometimes that just shows up in that one item.
Yeah, that's true. I
Hmm.
did really give a lot of focus to SC during those final days to sort of hammer out that process and the
Yeah.
meaning and the rules and all of that. So maybe my attention was a little bit
Oh,
diverted,
you
and that's
will.
what you
It will,
see.
and the test is such where and this is something which will crop up actually on practice tests too, where if you are at about 80% attention, y-
Mhm.
if you're taking a practice test on such as the GMAT, your score will drop to 60 percentile, 60% of what you would actually score. Why? Because the last 20% is really, really important. That's where you get stuck between the two most, I mean, the correct answer choice and the most likely incorrect ones. So,
Yeah.
and that's the same thing that happens if your focus is slightly off. It happens with all of us. uh, the test is just one data point. I think it's the consistency of metrics that's something that you need to worry about. So when you look at some of these accounts that I share, what you would really see, it's not just the mock scores um, that matter. It's actually the consistency of metrics.
Mhm.
I'm going to share another account. We had a student, Magdalena, who scored a 780 on the GMAT, and she had excellent metrics all across. And but what really happened, I think, 2 days before our actual test. Just hold on. So hold on, sorry about that. She 2 days before the test, she scored a 690 because her focus
Oh,
wasn't there,
that
and she
must have.
wrote to us like, what the hell is happening? Prior to this, I was scoring a 750, 760 on Sigma X mocks. Now I've scored a 690 on a Sigma X mock. And she talked to one of our strategy experts, Archit, and said, it's an outlier. I see so many other data points that are out there which show that you're a 750, 760 student. True enough, on the actual test she scored a 780. And
Mhm.
so these outliers will happen. For you, that happened on the CR subsection in your case, and for some others it will happen. But it, when you have so many other data points, you shouldn't doubt your ability.
Yeah.
By the way, if it so happens that those data points are bad and you get a good score on the actual test or on a mock test, don't trust it, because that is also not going to repeat. I've seen it cut both ways too.
Yeah.
So
I think that's true. That consistency is extremely important
oh,
in the
super
whole
important. Yes.
GMAT process.
And the same thing where, and we do this where, in our stage one, if you see good metrics with diligence, where you've been studying SC consistently, and then you go and take cementing quizzes within 2 days, we track this data. Do you know what percentage of people actually graduate through cementing if you've been studying SC consistently and
How
and
many?
going, huh?
Seven,
What percent?
90, 70, 80?
90. And do you know how long it takes for them to graduate through cementing? Once if you do it,
2 days, 3 days, maybe?
actually 2.5 days. Yes,
Oh, okay.
two and a half
Yeah.
days.
So they put in that effort and they put in the right effort and they saw those results.
Yes. So we actually track that piece, because that's kind of how we really figure out how to do tweaks in the scores. And this is where, if you do the stage one diligently, if your metrics are good, and our good metrics it's pretty loose. It's not 80%. We take 70%
Yeah.
as a threshold. And and but we take first attempts, not second, but first attempts only.
Mhm.
And that's where 90% of the people pass cementing. And
Yeah,
by the way, if we change that threshold to 50% or 60%, that
it'll be a lot
metric.
higher.
No. If we really say stage one, your average score is 60%, and the
Uh-huh.
concept and practice
Uh-huh.
score is that 90% drops to 45%. If you do stage
Yeah,
one poorly, you're not going to
not
pass
gonna
it.
do. Yeah.
That part we also know. It cuts either way.
Hmm. Yeah, that's extremely logical if you think about it,
It's
because
very logical. Yes.
you can't cement what you don't know, right?
Yes.
You can't lay a foundation where you haven't even mixed the cement yet.
Yes.
Quite
And
frankly.
and that's the other piece. A lot of people really think, people used to think about 10 to 12 days most people take to finish the SC course, because people don't study 9 hours a day like you do. But then it's those, once you do that, the investment that you put in over there, that leads to you doing cementing in those 2.5 days. And that's where the
Yeah.
real benefit comes in over there. And 2.5 days is regular person, 2.5, 3 hours a day, not 9 hours a day. For someone like you, it's one
Yeah.
day.
I'm a different case. I
Yeah.
think that I'm not really the metric a lot of people would be measuring themselves
Yes.
against.
Yeah, with regards to the time, you are the metric how many hours you need, but with regards to the time span, I think unless you can put in that many hours. And so I think the last question that I want to take on is, how did you manage to study 9 hours a day? What did you do during the day? Because you said you started your day at 5:30 in the morning and you ended at 11 p.m. So how did you keep yourself motivated during that time?
So, one, most importantly, I had an amazing, wonderful support system. None of this would have been possible without my friends and parents. So I'd wake up. I'll give you an idea of my day. So I'd wake up at 5:30, and my dad, he's an extremely early riser. So he'd so sweet. He'd make me chai early in the morning.
Mhm.
Wake up at 5:30, study till about 7:30, and then I'd do the whole breakfast and get ready for the day. Start again at 9, go till
Mhm.
1, and it says 9 hours, but again, you learn something, you have to take the time to internalize that, you have to take the time to look at the questions, do your whole error analysis. Then I know the afternoon is my least productive period, so I take that as sort of a break for me. So I'd connect with my friends, I'd spend time with my family, I'd read a book, maybe I'd watch a serial. Actually, I didn't watch any movies at that time, forget that. I'd watch a lot of YouTube videos. And then in the evening again, I'd start around maybe 4, and intermittently from 4 till 9, 10, 11, depending on the day, I'd work. So I wouldn't say, again, from that 4 to 9, I'd take a break for lunch. For dinner, I'd take 10, 15 minutes break in between videos when I felt like, okay, I've reached a saturation point. If I take something else on right now, I won't do it right. So I'd very consciously be like, I've hit a limit. I need to stop here for a moment, take some time to really internalize what I've learned, connect with everyone else, and then come back and keep going. So
Okay,
that was how
that's
my day went.
very, very good. I mean, knowing when you're getting into that saturation, when you're getting saturated, is excellent, really important over here. One last question that I would take over here is like, do you think putting 50 hours a day for 50 consecutive days with full concentration can have a great impact? In your case, it did. 200-point
In
improvement, I
my
would.
case, it did.
Yes.
I've,
Now, yeah.
no, no, go ahead. No, go ahead. Please, please.
So, I mean, comparing to folks who can put only 2 hours. So, first of all, just to really say, 90% of our students put in 2 hours per day, not 9 hours per day. She's an exception. But I think
Yeah.
the exception doesn't change the mantra, which is if you're looking for 200 points of improvement, you need to put in about 240 hours. Okay. So for you, I mean, as long as you're putting in those high quality 2 hours a day, and you put in the required number of hours, that's absolutely fine. You don't need to put in 9 hours a day. In fact, we have upwards of 200 success stories. As I said, 95% of them put in 2 hours a day. They put longer, more hours on the weekend, but 2 hours a day during the weekdays or so. That's my take on it. Rida, what about you?
Yeah, absolutely. And this 9 hours a day, it wouldn't have been enough to get me to a 7:30 if I wasn't doing an extremely, I wasn't giving my all during it. If I wasn't giving 100% of myself towards towards that preparation, right? So again, even if I'd done the kind of quality in my preparation over maybe a 6-month period,
Mm.
with the kind of diligence that I'd done, I believe that I could have again scored a 730 or more, right? Because what was important wasn't the 9 hours in 50 days. That's great. But it was the 9 hours of
Mm.
extreme concentration, extreme hard work, extremely conscious improvement and tracking my mistakes that led to the 730, right? It
Okay.
wasn't just a blind nine
And the
hours.
9 hours were not straight 9 hours. They were spread across, a good
Yeah.
16 hours. That's very important. Let's take the last question because we are already over time and my younger daughter is here. So I'm going to just have her bring here. Have her come over here. But this is for you.
Did you do any mocks or exercises the days
Yeah.
prior to the final
Yes.
exam?
Yes.
Hi, first of all, hi.
Say hi. Mm.
No, okay,
Mm.
that's fine.
Mm.
So yeah, I did my final mock a couple of days before my final exam,
Mm.
and I wasn't really doing any particular quizzes at that point of time. It was more about fine tuning what I already knew and consciously applying those process skills and refining my method. That's all that it was.
Yeah, so I think just for Rida's timeline, she started the e-GMAT course on 5th of August, went it 11th of September. From 11th of September till 26th, she took 4 mocks, and then she went back to the course only as needed based
Yeah.
on the data from the mocks. So just if you want to make a visual timeline. All right, guys, with that, I want to thank everyone for joining me today. If you've liked this webinar, please like this, subscribe to the channel. You see many such success stories over there. Also, we have the SC webinar, which is this weekend. I'm going to highlight that as well. Definitely register for that. As well as we have the algebra webinar that's also there this weekend. In SC, we're going to talk about the meaning-based approach. We're going to really showcase how using this approach you can solve every um, SC question, whether it tests modifiers or lists, because in the end, it's all about the meaning. And algebra, we're going to focus on inequalities and absolute value. Okay. And by the way, this is not the one who stood well on the SAT. She is too young for that. So,
I think it would be an extreme outlier if she was the one who did really well on the
oh,
SAT. That's going
yeah,
beyond the pale.
yeah.
Bye.
Now she says bye. All right. AMR has a question. What's the question? I don't see the question. AMR. You mean 9 hours of viewing e-GMAT content, or does it include note making? I think it includes everything, right? It's learning portion.
Yeah. The 9 hours was my learning time, right?
Yeah.
Maybe it went a little bit here and there based on my note taking and all of that, but it
You can't
encompasses
view
the
videos
entire
for
learning
9 hours.
process.
Just to really tell
Yeah,
you, you
that
can't view videos for 9 hours.
there isn't enough videos to view for
Yes,
that
there isn't
long,
enough video.
actually.
And
There's not
you've
that much.
got to process that information, right? That's very
Yeah.
important. So, well, Rida, thank you very much for taking the time out. It was wonderful having you here. I'm sure our audience learned a lot. And thank you for being a diligent student, and congratulations once again on that 730 score.
Thank you for having me, and I sincerely thank the entire e-GMAT team for how much they've helped me during such a short span of time. And everyone was so wonderful throughout the entire thing.
Well,
So
thank you.
thank you again.
It was our pleasure.